It's my honor to welcome the magical and powerful Fae Johnstone to the stage.
Thank you so much. When Marwan was asking me about a performer for today, I suggested a drag performer, and I deeply regret my decision because that's a hell of a hard act to follow. Also, I love a banner that has the word damn in it, so big shout out to CreativeMornings Ottawa. Let's give them a round of applause for all that they do. I usually spend my days yelling at straight people and trying to get them to pay a little bit more attention to the queer and trans people. But my hope today is to share a little bit more about myself and some lessons I hope you might be able to take away from my story when it comes to finding pride in who you are and how you walk in this world. I'd like to start by asking y'all a question. Why am I holding a mic when they gave me a mic? Right here, that I'm hoping you're now hearing me through? Okay. Am I good? Oh, so I should hold both. I've been on a stage before. If you're here, I would like you to raise your hand if at any point in your life you have felt like you're pretending to be somebody else. Okay, lower your hands. Raise your hand if you feel like you haven't shown up as your full self in every aspect of your life each and every single day. Like you've had to hide parts of who you are or acted a little bit differently to help folks not be weird about you. I think that is a story that each and every one of us can relate to. And I know it's one that I spent a lot of my life trying to learn. At a young age, I learned this hard lesson. I learned that if you pretend to be somebody else, people will sometimes treat you better. If you pretend to be someone different from who you are, they maybe won't pick on you for the ways that you're different. And you'll imagine that life is easier that way. But over time, you'll see that there's a different kind of pain that comes with hiding those elements of who you are. It hurts you on the inside, even if it makes walking in this world on the outside a little bit easier. As a child, I was always the new kid. I am a military brat, so I grew up in small towns all across Canada, in fairly conservative communities where, shockingly, there wasn't a whole lot of queer representation. I'm sorry for Arn Pryor. I was also always the sensitive kid. Before I even knew I was a queer or trans person, I walked around with my heart on my sleeve and always showed up with a lot of energy, but also a lot of vulnerability. And as I entered school, even kindergarten and onwards, I realized that being the sensitive kid wasn't a nice thing to be. And that if I pretended to be someone else, I indeed would be treated better. Before I figured out that that wasn't worth it, I spent a lot of time trying to blend in. We have this stereotype of the closeted gay kid who, when they're in the closet, they're going around being a rampant homophobe. I am really, really not happy to admit I was that kid. I played 12 years of boys hockey, and in those environments I learned that if you call all of the other people slurs, they're less likely to call you a slur. Please don't take that as a life lesson in how to walk in this world. So to tell you a little bit about myself and to contextualize this concept and conversation around pride, my name is Fae Johnstone. I'm a 28-year-old trans woman. I'm a small business owner, an advocate for queer and trans communities, and I spend a lot of my time talking to media and engaging in the public fight for queer and trans rights. Now, for me, my work and my life generally as a trans woman has come with some significant adversity. I have been targeted for what I do. I have been harassed both on the streets of this city for looking like I do, but also had anti-queer and anti-trans groups paint a target on my back time and time again. I've received more hate mail than I ever would have imagined possible. But through it all, I have built a successful business, and I've been able to come into this role leading the charge against rising hate. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how I've overcome some of this adversity and what we can learn from it. Amidst all of the hate, my pride in who I am, my pride in my community that has faced so much and refuses to bow down, even in this era, as we see hate escalate again, has kept me going and given me the strength to stand strong in the face of adversity. By sharing some of the stories of my life, I hope you will learn to all embrace your authenticity and walk proudly in every aspect of your life. As I said a moment ago, I spent a lot of my childhood hiding who I was. I was bullied from kindergarten all the way to grade 11. And again, I learned that the stronger you walk, the more that you pretend to be like everyone else is, the nicer they will talk about you, and the more they might actually leave you alone. But as I walked in that world as that hockey jock of another era, it's great to walk by your high school classmates and have them not recognize you. Best thing, because none of us want to talk to each other anymore. But underneath this facade that I had as a teen of being one of the tough guys, I struggled with depression and deep insecurity. I loathed myself on a fundamental level, and the steps that I took to blend in hurt me even more. To be the kid who was throwing slurs at other people while knowing that you are the thing that those slurs describe, teaches you self-loathing like no one can imagine. I walked around reliant on homophobia and transphobia to hide my own insecurities. And I did that for about 16 years. We're gonna imagine that like baby me was also feeling all those insecurities. All of that changed for me when I turned 16, and I started to come to terms with something that I had not realized was going on underneath all of the icky. I realized that I couldn't survive if I kept pretending to be somebody other than who I actually am. And so at 16 years old, I came out as gay. As bisexual, actually. I posted a poem on Facebook about a swing that swings both ways. If you know any baby gays, do not suggest that they write a really bad poem to come out. Just posting a selfie with a rainbow in the background is enough in 2023. But as soon as I came out, my world changed in incredible ways. I came out in December and showed up at school in the new year with like the tightest skinny jeans and like lowest V-neck you could ever imagine. It was a bright pink shirt. I bought it at Hot Topic. And I had a media studies class on the first day back. And as soon as they turned off the lights to watch one of the movies, I lit up the classroom all on my own. Coming out gave me an opportunity to take a risk, to redefine myself, and to distance myself from who I had been before. And it allowed me to walk tall and to take confidence in who I am. And that act also immediately changed how I felt about myself. The world was not sunshine and roses, but suddenly I could manage the everyday with a little bit more ease. The mental health issues, the anxiety, the depression, it didn't disappear, but it became so much more manageable because I realized that I could live honestly as myself. And as that 16-year-old gay kid, I also realized that being myself would invite others to be themselves too. Now, I know that every other kid in high school is now gay, depending on who you ask. But at that time in 2011, there were like 5 out gay kids, and all of us walked small in our classrooms because we were worried on how others would treat us. But authenticity is a hell of a drug. And that hiding that came at a cost hurt me in a way I couldn't have understood or ever described at that time. But living who I am on the outside made me feel good on the inside and made this world more manageable. So what can you learn from this part of my story? It is something I think straight people and cis people and all of us can learn from queer and trans people. It is the fact that each of us feel pressure in a world obsessed with gender norms and social norms, and a world that is still soaked in respectability and these ideas of who you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to show up in every space, where difference is still stigmatized. But the truth of the matter is that being true to yourself, being proud of who you are, and taking strength in that authenticity will make you a happier person, because it is indeed a contagious experience. But for me, something still wasn't quite right. I know that we conflate the drag queens and the trans people sometimes, but I wasn't just a gay kid if you haven't figured that out yet. I was still struggling with these anxieties and these worries, and while coming out as gay changed me in a powerful way, and I was suddenly getting better grades in school and involved in civic activities, there was still something that wasn't quite right. There was something underneath it all that I was still struggling with. Growing up, I had never heard the word trans. I had never heard about trans people. I had seen, all of the men in dresses clips that were going around in the 2000s and heard the jokes about those weird people over there that we don't like to talk about. But I'd never actually met a trans person. And then at 19 years old, I met my first trans person. And I started to learn that there were other options, that these ideas, that these norms, you didn't have to be bound by them. And so for me, after conversations with close friends and family and loved ones, I realized that I was trans, and at the time, non-binary specifically. And while coming out as gay was hard, and it was rough, nothing could have prepared me for how the world changed the moment I came out as a trans person. I remember the day quite well. It was July. It was December 2016 on the 31st. I still get annoyed when I came out as gay. I didn't write down the date. And so I decided if you come out on New Year's Eve, you'll never forget that it happened. And I remember walking out of my apartment looking a little bit like I do today, with much worse eyebrows, wearing makeup and woman's clothing, and I have never been as scared in my life as I was in that moment. The first 2 years after you come out as trans is the roughest, because you have to confront the systemic misogyny and homophobia and transphobia, and the fact that you're a lightning rod for so much of it. I was terrified that first day, and I could feel my legs shaking as I walked to the bus stop to go to a queer New Year's Eve party. I got through that moment, but I realized it wasn't just a moment. It's every day as a trans person, especially as a trans woman who's 5'11", used to be a hockey jock, and has the shoulders and thighs to show it. And so now in this world, I still encounter that adversity, that feeling when you walk down the street and somebody looks at you, not always with hate, not always as if they think that you're something horrible or dangerous, but as if you're different and strange. And that's the everyday. There's the added layer of people who will throw things in your face, who will throw slurs at you, who will grab you, follow you, harass you. I like to joke when I talk about the rise of hate that I have been harassed on every street of downtown Ottawa. And the thing that has gotten me through that as well, similar if you haven't picked up on the theme, was my pride in myself and my pride in my community. It was the recognition, again, that even if my visibility, my authenticity was harder for the world to embrace, it was still worth it. This world is not good to trans people. Every trans person is a superstar. We have lived through adversity to a degree that few others can understand. We live through a world where we know our safety is never guaranteed. It's not that everyone is icky each and every single day. It's that the risk is always there. If you're walking to a coffee shop, if you're going to get groceries, that somebody will notice, say something, and in extreme circumstances, do something. But even for all of that, it has been worth it every step of the way, and that can teach us something powerful. Again, it can teach us that this world is never meant to be easy for each of us. That there will be moments where being your honest self, showing up as a gender non-conforming person, or being really into comic books and talking about it all of the time, whatever that authenticity, passion, and pride is, it can give you strength to be who you truly are. The other lesson is that authenticity and pride is an evolving process. It's not that you wake up one day and you say, hello, I am gay, and everything sorts itself out, and you now have a deep sense of your own identity that you can walk with forevermore. Each and every one of us are in an ongoing process of becoming ourselves, of learning about ourselves, and if we can embrace that journey and take pride in that journey, it allows us to embrace who we will be tomorrow, the next day, and years even from now. And that taking pride in ourselves and embracing that evolution in who we are can allow us to walk tall as ourselves in every single place we show up in. Now, as I've alluded to, in the last year or so, I have had a target painted on my back many a time. It started almost a year ago, actually, when the federal government unveiled this gay action plan that I was very unhappy about. But I had a picture taken with a federal minister. And immediately, one of Canada's far-right media publications ran an op-ed that was like, Trudeau government appeasing radical trans activists. We'll get there. They truly do believe that we have the strings and are pulling this government along to do everything that we'd like to. Raise your hand if you've met Canada's trans member of parliament. There isn't one. Raise your hand if you know a trans senator, member of provincial parliament, business owner, mayor, city councillor. That's a tangent. For me, though, I've gone through, since that instance, about a year and 1 day ago, I have had this fixated group of far-right bigots who are fascinated with everything that I do. It's ebbed and flowed over the months, but it really peaked this year in March. In March, I was included on a Hershey's Canada International Women's Day ad campaign, where I, alongside 4 young women, had our faces on special edition chocolate bars. This was a huge moment for me. I was a corporate sellout for 3 seconds. Now, on March 1st, when I put this ad out on my social media, I did it with glee, hope, and optimism. And then Twitter happened. Overnight, and the 7 days that followed, I had some of the biggest figureheads in the far right take issue with me. Folks like Jordan Peterson, Rebel News, Tucker Carlson did a segment about me. Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, the leading figureheads of the American far right, decided that my life deserved to become a nightmare. I had hate mail. I had old pictures of me from before I came out as trans shared publicly. There's memes and caricatures of my appearance circulating on social media to this day. I had security guards placed on me for 7 days straight, and I walked everywhere with a bulletproof vehicle driving behind me. But in the face of this hate, I again learned some life lessons. First, don't agree to put your face on a chocolate bar as a trans woman without really thinking about it. And that people will be threatened and turn you into an existential crisis simply for happening to be a trans woman who is willing and happy to live a public life. That if you speak up and show up as yourself, they will turn that into a political issue. But in the face of that hate, rather than bowing to it, I have used my experiences and what's happened to me to show the world that times are changing and that the world is not always as nice to us as it could be. I have used my experiences to take action, to raise awareness about hate, and to fuel greater efforts to support queer and trans people in this country. And through it all, it hasn't been some deep resilience or inner strength that has kept me going. It has been my queer and trans community. It has been the folks who reached out, whose shoulders I could cry on. It has been the moms of trans kids who have said, thank you, my kid loves you, and we've bought so many of your chocolate bars. And I think that shows us that even when we feel alone, community can get us through everything. That if we lean on our friends, if we create space where we can support each other, that can be a source of strength that homophobes just can't ever measure up to. As a community, I believe that we can help each other embrace our own pride. And I think that a lot of straight folks can learn from that. Queer and trans people, by our very existence, are forced to confront the gender norms and social norms that screw all of us over, be we queer folks or straight folks. We often walk as physical embodiments of, what's the word? Wow, trains of thought. As physical embodiments of all that this world doesn't want you to be or look like. And through that, I think we've shown that if we live proudly and loudly, it can actually help others do the same as well. But the big thing here is that authenticity is not a solution to systemic oppression. if we can take that pride in ourselves and recognize that every individual is deserving of the same, if we can imagine that each of us, as queer or trans people, or as straight folks and cis folks, that each of us do indeed, as you showed at the start of this talk, hide parts of who we are to make others more comfortable, to make others happier, or imagine that their world is the way that they like to pretend it is. If we can show people that there is an alternative, in whatever way, shape, or form that takes, it can indeed change the world. And so my invitation to you is to walk with that authenticity, but also to connect the dots to why this world denies each of us that authenticity and why we have to fight for it in the first place. I like to say that trans girls walk small for everyone else's convenience. I am like the loud extrovert Leo of the trans community, but most of the trans people in my life, especially the trans women, they walk with their heads bowed. They scrunch their shoulders, and they spend their time trying to make sure no one notices them. Because we already stand out as lightning rods, and when people notice you, they might not be nice about it. But I would love to imagine a world where we've dealt with those structures and systems, where every trans kid, where every straight kid, where every gay kid can show up in kindergarten loving their pink nails and spinny dresses, or hating all of that and wanting the cool butch haircut and the 3 nose piercings. And my invitation this Pride, as we celebrate how far we've come as a community, as we celebrate the progress that we've made, is to recognize how far we still have to go. To recognize that those kids who were bullied for being gay when we were in high school are still being bullied for being gay in 2023. That the kids who are struggling, the locker room conversations are still homophobic, that the world has not come as far as we would like to believe, but that if we can show up with that pride and that authenticity, we can help make it a little bit better. And we can show that 12-year-old gay kid that there are queer and trans adults who've been there, who've survived through it, and who refuse to make themselves small for anybody else. This week is Pride Week, and it is a Pride Week that hits different. Hate is on the rise. We're seeing protests at queer and trans events. We're seeing an increase year over year in hate crimes towards our communities. And gender nonconforming trans people and drag queens are being used as an example of everything we don't like in this world. And so if you believe in this concept of pride, community, and authenticity, I invite you to join us on Sunday at the Pride Parade. My invitation is to show up in record numbers so that those gay, queer, and trans kids can see that Ottawa has their back. Show up with your rainbows and maybe show up a little bit differently than you may have before. You can dye your hair overnight and show up on Sunday. It'll be a good time. It will wash out. But more than that, I invite you to join us at the Trans March taking place this evening at 5:30 p.m. at the intersection of Bank and Laurier. The far-right anti-trans groups, they're coming for trans folks, and it's not just about us. It's about the principle of what we represent. And if you could join us and show these kids that you will stand not just for queer folks, but for queer and trans people, and the world that we're trying to build, they will take confidence from you to walk with pride, to walk with authenticity, and to do it hand in hand with their community. And so with that, and with hope that you've enjoyed this ramble about pride, thank you so much. It's been an honor, a pleasure. Happy Pride. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Faye. Look at this. Thank you for showing up as your authentic self, for communicating so clearly your experience, the things we need to action, and I think you made it obvious for us what we need to do in showing up as allies and as part of the community. So thank you so much, Faye. I also want to mention Faye is the busiest woman that I know. She's had like 10 other speaking gigs just like the last 2 days. So thank you so much for putting in the work and giving us such an amazing talk. We do have time for questions. James has the mic, so if you have a question, put up your hand and we'll run around. I can get us started with one. You mentioned like the rise in hate and the current climate, and I think we're all privy to the news and everything that's been going on. What's your approach now in creating action and advocacy around all of this now, like in this year? I'll stop talking.
I love this question because I think that there's layers, right? Like the baseline is show up and support your queer and trans friends, families, and siblings. I think a lot of us are feeling, it's not again that like the hate is every day, but we're feeling an added weight on our shoulders. We're feeling a worry and an anxiety about where we're gonna be in 5 years. And it's often something that's normalized for us. We're taught that we're gonna face that adversity, we're gonna have that anxiety, and we're not always given an outlet for it. We're not always invited to show the part that hurts. I don't show the public world when it's too much and I'm like crying in my apartment and drinking a few glasses of wine or mimosas. But my spouse lets me break down on their shoulder. When the world gets to be too much, my friends are there for me. They send me pizzas. So on a baseline level, be that person who's there for queer and trans people and who lets us show you the hurt and not always the happy. But then the other layers are, we have a crisis on our hands. And do you know who's best equipped to tackle that crisis head on? It's not governments, though they have a role to play. It's not politicians, though they have a role to play. It's organizations like Kind Space, the 10 Oaks Project, and Max Ottawa. It's the queer and trans organizations in this city who are there when the gay kid is kicked out of their home and they have no one to call. And so you can support their work, you can donate to what they do, and you can help advocate for them to be sustained and supported so they can do so much more than they're currently resourced to do. The third thing, and there's 4 things for the record. The third thing is you can have conversations with your family and friends. The misinformation about queer and trans people is growing so quickly, and all of us are trying to catch up to it. We have influencers in our community, but we do not have the reach of the far right who is telling you that we're putting litter boxes in classrooms. They are using genuine, like blatant lies and conspiracy theories to depict us as a threat and to make you think that there's been like the whole world's been duped by those weird trans people. And so have those conversations that come back to the inherent dignity and the humanity of all people. And understand and communicate why we're not trying to turn your kids gay. We're trying to make sure that your queer and trans children can grow up to be queer and trans adults, and that hopefully they're a little bit less traumatized than the queer and trans adults who have already been through that, and especially those who've been through it when this world was even harsher and harder on us. The last thing is engage your elected officials. The bar in this world is so low for governments and politicians when it comes to queer and trans people. They will put out a press release, show up for a photo op. Maybe a few of them will go to Pride, unless you're the Conservative Party of Canada. Sorry. But show up and engage your politicians because these are systemic issues and governments need to walk with our communities to address both this rise in hate, but also the inequities that are still hanging out in our communities. Queer and trans people are more likely to be poor, homeless, and harassed than straight and cisgender people. The hate right now is making that worse, but the baseline still wasn't good enough. And so engage your elected officials, have those conversations, because our community needs funding, we need leadership, we need support to get through this moment. But again, my world is not one where I want queer and trans people to be slightly safer. It's one where no queer or trans person and no person is homeless, poor, hated, and harassed. And while governments won't be a silver bullet to that, they have a big role to play nonetheless. Those are your 4 action items.
More questions?
Hi, Faye. Thanks for today. It was really inspiring to hear you, and thank you for doing what you do. It's really important work. Sorry, I'm emotional. So stupid. I cry
I'm getting
every
better at
Creative
making people
Mornings,
cry.
so-
It's like the best and worst trait as a speaker, but thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for the vulnerability that takes.
Well, I do it a lot, unfortunately. So my question is, I think you spoke a lot about community as a pillar of support and, really what brings you strength. As someone who may not have community, youth, especially if you're raised in like different parts of town, maybe not central to downtown as well, it's harder to find. And then you're talking about being small and how scary life can be as a trans person. Do you have any suggestions for somebody who's looking to build community as to how to go about it, where to find like people who are like-minded, and yeah.
I love that. There is a problem in Ottawa and in most of our cities where all of the gay things happen within 8 blocks of the downtown core. And so we do a disservice to our queer and trans folks in rural communities and in the suburbs, and the kids whose parents are not supportive enough to drive them to the peer group that's at 6 p.m. in downtown Ottawa. And so I think the pandemic has taught us some good things about community. You can just find a Discord channel that all the gay teens are already hanging out on, and you can learn things and connect from there. But you can also try to find the supportive places and spaces. I was in Fernie, BC, tiny little community surrounded by mountains. It was the coolest thing. It's in Elk Valley. I did not see an elk, and I'm still mad about it. But I saw folks who found community in the United Church pastor who loved to wear rainbows. And so those small ways of seeing people like you, or seeing people who show their support with you, those can become little oases for our young folks in particular. But I think the other thing is, if you want to start something, you can be that person. Find the teacher in your high school who will help you form a GSA. Find the other few gay kids and decide to do a spontaneous gays in the park picnic. Those small ways of just being connected to community, of having people around you, that makes the world an easier place. And while it's hard, especially I think outside of our downtown core, to find that community, I would say go to one of the peer groups that we have to offer in this city. Kind Space, Family Services Ottawa, organizations have these spaces. And you don't have to be a recurring attendee. I am horrible at going to a peer group. I was the gay kid who was like, I don't want to go sit in a circle and play with fidget toys alongside a bunch of other queer people, though I love it deeply. But if you go once, you can find their Instagram accounts after, and then you can say, hey, we're going to do a gay picnic in the park. And connection and community can come from there. I hope that was helpful. Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
Okay, I don't know if my meds kicked in, so it might be a little bit rambly question. So you talk about how you're the extroverted kid. Comes out, goes like, I'm that. I have a trans niece who's definitely that kid. Yeah. She's amazing. But my nibbling is the introvert, and I don't really know how to support them. And I was just wondering if you have any, what's an action item I can help them with. I try and do their hair when I'm down. I try and take them shopping, do that stuff. But they're at that 13-year-old age, about to go into high school, not sure when they want to show who they are. So do you have any advice to how I can support my nibbling?
One of my favorite, I don't know if it's appropriate in your context, but one of my favorite stories was a friend of mine's kid came out as trans, and as a trans guy at 14, and they bought the kid a bow tie. And it was the small way of visibly showing I know that life is hard, but I'm gonna get you this gendered thing and the gender I now know you are. And so those small gestures, the little things, I think mean the world. The other side is it's great to be the introvert, I think. My spouse is an introvert. I have to drag them kicking and screaming to every soiree I go to, and my life this week is soirees, and they're just suffering, but they love me. So finding the other introverts and finding activities that you can do that don't force you into big groups or large environments. Every introvert can walk as tall as us Leos do, but I think giving them opportunities where they are able to connect with other introverts and realize there's nothing wrong with that, because I think the quiet kids often take a subtle message of shame about being the quiet kids. And I train youth facilitators as part of my work, and I always tell people, you do not have to be the person who goes on stage and is whoa, hundreds of jokes, personality. You can be the quiet person who will notice things others miss. You don't have to be leading from the front, you don't have to be on stage to change the world. Some of my favorite people are the ones who are not public or extroverted, and they're there checking in with the folks who are public and extroverted. They're there making sure that we're okay, and they're actually creating the calmer community spaces that allow many of us to heal. And so I think leaning into that strength of being an introvert, finding those other quiet, anxious gays to hang out with, and then finding the moments where we can celebrate, amplify, and uplift. That helps me, and I think it helps everybody. Yeah, thank you for the question.
Cool. Hey, Faye, it's Alex.
Hey.
Hey. So this might be a kind of a difficult question to answer because I know that you're very humble, but I think it's also important in talking about being bold to be our authentic selves and as someone who is like invested in your well-being. So I recognize, and I'm so sorry for like the harassment that comes with being a trans woman, and then also for being such like an outspoken advocate and champion for it. But I just wanted to ask, at the end of the day, after all of that, like, are you able to take a breath and appreciate how much you've done for like the trans community and everything? Because like, it's so important for you being yourself and other people being able to see that, even with all of the hate that comes from it. And it means so much to other people. And I just want to know that you can sit back and appreciate what you do for other people as well too, and not just for yourself.
Thank you. That is all. I feel like when I was like 19, there was a sense that you have to do like all of the things or you're like failing as a human being. Yeah, I'm looking at the 19-year-olds in the audience. But I think like this is a lesson that I'm still trying to learn and that I'm not good at because I do have a tendency to overwork myself. It's a really healthy practice. But I think being able to sit back, like I celebrate myself when I'm hanging out in community. And that is actually it. It's when I can put aside when I can show up in like my fishnets and my crop tops instead of the nice business shirts. We are many things and many people, but I think it is like I am trying to take pride in that more. But I also have an ego, and so it's the dance of like you don't want to be full of yourself, but you want to be proud of yourself. If you ever come up with a solution to that crisis and problem, please let me know. I will get there one day, and then I'll give a great talk about it. Yeah. But thank you.
Thanks. This is more of like a creator-influencer question, I guess, because, like for example, the Hershey chocolate bar thing, that was a big international gig for you, and you're a creator in Ottawa and stuff. I'm just wondering, like, how did you get involved with that? Did they reach out to you? Is it just because your influence was enough that they noticed you, or were they doing a casting call, or that kind of thing?
Well, they had 5 slots for the chocolate bars. 3 racialized women, a white lady, and the trans girl. I'm kidding. They were great. Hershey's was also wonderful. Don't tell them I said that. So they reached out. I don't know how they heard of me or found out about me. I just got an email in my inbox. And I had a moment and I was like, wow, I'm getting the coolest spam email or like the greatest scam attempt. And then I Googled and I was like a creative agency that was bringing me on board, and it was they seemed legit, and we had a phone call, and I was like, okay. My fun fact as well, just around the whole Hershey's thing, like it was like, how dare they include a trans lady? The year before, they'd also included the trans lady. The world's a weird place, and hate is a hell of a thing. But yeah, I think it was a cold email. I didn't know them. I imagine maybe somebody followed me on Instagram or read something that I did, and it was. I feel like there was more to your question, but I've lost it.
I don't know, just like being an Ottawa creator, like get any tips on how, get international fame, like, a lot of people think, you got to New York for that.
So again, just be a trans woman on the chocolate bar and you'll just get, but I think it is like, it's finding different outlets and helping communicate the point underlying what you do. The way that I have been able to build the platform that I have is largely actually like writing and commenting in mainstream media. So like I write for The Citizen, the Toronto Star, and other mainstream publications. And a lot of it is trying to take like a radical message of queer and trans people and package it in a way that a mom, a dad, somebody in a rural community will listen to. And that is a hard skill to learn. We are not as good at that generally as we could be. It's different to take our world and show why it's important and meaningful to everybody else. But learning how to do that communication, how to engage in that public platform, and how to reach different kinds of audiences That, I think, has been the thing that has allowed me to get where I am, and also being angry and tweeting annoying threads a lot. It goes a long way. Thank you for the question. Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure.